So agriculture practices can alter the biotic interactions between residence antagonists and soil-borne pathogens, leading to partial suppressions of the pathogen population. So, sorry. So, this phenomenon, what we call as when the suppression of of the antagonist to the soil-borne pathogens as a general, they can be called as general suppressions. This suppression can be achieved by competition for resources during critical during critical periods in the life cycle of the pathogen. In these soils, a large active microbial community and associated soil fauna compete for energy, nutrients, and other substances required for pathogen survival and growth. So free-living soil microorganisms that live in the rhizoplane, for instance, and the rhizosphere will occupy favorable habitats and thus block pathogens from inhibiting these regions. So additional control may be achieved by microbial predators such as protists, bacterial feeding and fungal feeding nematodes that are attracted to the rhizosphere by root exudates and microbial activity. So another suppression mechanism is called specific suppression. This refers to individual antagonists or groups of soil foodweb organisms that are antagonistic to a pathogen during one or more stages of its life cycle. So a soil that exhibits a specific suppression could be studied more closely to isolate the key antagonists, which could then be cultured and later on transferred to the other soil. So if indigenous biological organisms are not present in a particular field, then we can add biocontrol agent. So for instance, the specific suppression that we discussed before. So introduced antagonists may be added once, occasionally or repeatedly to maintain appropriate level of biocontrol. So a small amount of inoculum can be applied. Okay, a small amount of inoculum can be applied to seeds or cutting or spread in the furrow before planting seeds or before transplanting. So to be effective, the introduced antagonists must have rhizosphere competence. So which means that they are capable of colonizing the root surface or growing in the rhizosphere in the presence of competitors and also the predators. So rhizosphere as extremely effective introduced antagonists because the rhizobacteria. I'm worried that I mispronounce it. Rhizobacteria again are extremely effective introduced antagonists. So simply because they can attach and distribute themselves along the growing root surface. Here are some of the bacterial traits that make rhizobacteria, okay, the effective introduced antagonists for biological control. So first, the production of extracellular polysaccharides. So these extracellular polysaccharides can protect the cells in the colony from the desiccation. This protection helps the introduced antagonists to bind to the root and resist displacement by indigenous microorganisms. Also, they have if the rhizobacteria, sorry, I'm kind of like problem with my with my speech right now. I'm sorry. So next is production of fimbria. So these filamentous appendages aid microbial attachment to roots. So several bacteria possesses these appendages. Several bacteria possess these appendages. For example, the free-living Pseudomonas fluorescens that suppress tag all disease in wheat. We will discuss this in detail of the case studies in the next video. Next is the production of also flagella. Okay, so certain bacteria possess flagella that permit the bacteria itself to propel themselves, to go themselves for some distance, so along a growing plant roots to sites that are not yet colonized by other organisms. So as a rhizobacteria, as a good rhizobacteria antagonist, so they can move this area to one area. So this is good if they have the flagella. Also, what we call as a chemotaxis, okay, this is the ability to receive and interpret chemical signals from plant roots that may guide this rhizobacteria through soil pores and the soil solution to the root surface. So it is also important that the rhizobacteria itself that can form spores or enter into very small soil pores during unfavorable conditions. So make sure that they can survive in the long term. And also finally, if there is can use the complex carbohydrates as an energy source, then this is can be the key for the antagonist bacteria. So the ability to use complex carbohydrates. Of course, they are going to the simple carbohydrate like the root exudates, but if they can use the complex carbohydrate, so they don't rely definitively to the root exudates, but then because they can use complex carbohydrates. Though this ensures their survival when plant roots are not present at the site of introduction. So instead, because again, this is the characteristics that we can use to introduce rhizobacteria. They don't have rhizobacteria, they don't have root, so how they can survive? So which means that they also need to a good rhizobacteria for antagonists, for introduce antagonists. One of the characteristics that can use the complex carbohydrate. You can refer and read this paper by Reichmakers and Mazzola, published in Science in 2016. Try to understand this figure and then try to read this paper. I will give you in the put it in the spectrum, and we will discuss this in the class. So in general, management practices are helpful in generating an active and healthy soil food web. Okay, management practices influence the activity or how to make the soil food web active. So when you have this soil food web active soil food web, which means they have diverse, they have a lot of things going on, processes going on, they can act against the pathogen. So soil food web itself can be as a suppressor or the antagonist, okay, which is here we can call as the general suppression. As for specific suppression, technically it is hard to achieve since we need to know which specific organism can target specific pathogen. Perhaps the simplest way to achieve biological control, biocontrol, is to manage the soil in a way that promotes an active soil food web. General suppression is often can be enhanced by adding organic matter as the food resources. Okay, these food resources we can add more like compost, for instance. These can be the food resources for the antagonists, especially the bacteria and also the fungi. So here, keyword here is soil food web.